3. Okay, so again, it's all a matter of looking in the right direction and making sure the burr is vertical. Okay, so when you're doing the central groove, look this way, so you know exactly where you are facially and lingually, right? So see how much you're undercutting the facial wall? You're leaning over to the lingual about like this. Now, one of the things that causes that is trying to look this direction. Okay, so if you try to look over the buccal cusp by direct vision, very few people ever check the vertical angle. They always undercut the facial wall. That happens a lot, but it never happens when you're using the mirror like this. You can check the vertical angle this way, and you can see everything you need to. So the width of the isthmus is only controlled when we look along the central groove. And again, for composite, we're doing a composite prep now, right? So the isthmus is the size of the burr. That's it. No bigger. So one time through, and that's it. Now, your position of your wall distally is okay. A little dovetail into the facial groove, but that's it. You don't need to be going here, you don't need to be going here. But when you're looking from the facial and leaning the burr lingually, everything gets compromised. Now, you're trying to go gingerly, but you don't have a margin here. And you don't have a margin over here. So let's go back to the 330 burr. And do the occlusal outline so that we can go gingerly, okay? That's critical. So now we're going to keep the burr vertical, look parallel to the contact, downward at a 45-degree angle. Look how much you undercut this facial wall right here. So you have the burr leaning like 30 degrees, 35 degrees lingually. So now, how are we supposed to get the margin conservative out there, right? This is where the margin should have been, about right here. And then you come in 90 degrees this way, but when it's not vertical, you end up undermining that whole wall. And now the margin, the facial margin, has to be moved way out here. And even farther, because right now it's a little bit acute. When we get to 90, that's still not good enough. Composite needs the obtuse angle. So we're going to move the margin out even farther facially. And again, always cut from the margin inward. But don't forget, you didn't have the margin. If you don't have a margin, you can't start at the margin and cut inward. You can't get a nice wall. You can't get any angle that you can recognize. Lingually, we're going to put the margin way over here. Again, notice the only thing I care about is how close am I to the adjacent tooth. I'm still not far enough away. I still don't have enough clearance. Make sure the burr is vertical. Look this way so you know how close you are to the adjacent tooth. Find the margin so you're happy about where that margin is. So I know I'm going to get some clearance there now. But you had the margin way over here, right? Yeah. And then we're going to cut straight in. And I forgot we were doing composite. Yeah. So now it's a little bit obtuse, just barely. Then we're going to come, once we get in far enough, we're going to make this smooth curve here to join the isthmus, which would have been much more narrow. Then we can find the corner of the box, way over here. See what you're doing? You're trying to put the box here.
Okay, yeah.
So your box has no idea where the contact is. That's why we cut to the middle of the contact and we make the box to the lingual and the buccal. And again, when you put the burr near the adjacent tooth and then push gingerly, that hard, it's always going to fall through to the gingival floor like that, or all the way to the gingiva even. So that's where we're very careful to make sure we have the occlusal outline done beautifully before we push gingerly at all. But anyway, now you see where to put the internal line angle right here. way over there. And then do the same thing over here. But again, you can't do this. It's not going to work out right if the burr is not vertical. And if you're trying to do it by direct vision, it's pretty much never going to be vertical. It's possible, but it's not likely. So using the mirror the way I'm showing you is your only pathway towards having it come out well. Okay? All right.
Number 3.
Okay. Okay, so very shallow on the occlusal. So again, when the walls are so short, your pulpophore is underextended, and then when you have really short walls, it's really easy to overextend the outline form because the walls are so short they don't protect you. So I would go deeper pulpally from the beginning and just keep the isthmus the same size as the burr.
Okay.
We'll make sure we're far enough distally so we include that pit, so you're not too far off there. Then a little bit up that facial groove, and that's about all you have to do. Now you're trying to go gingerly, but you don't really have a facial margin. It should be out about here. And again, when you get the correct pulpophore position, pulpophore level, then bring that level all the way to the middle of the contact, then bring that level all the way out to the facial margin, then bring that level all the way in from the facial margin at whatever angle you want. So you thought you were going gingerly, but really you're still at the level where the pulpophore should have been.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes, yes.
Now over here, we're going to have to go a little bit farther lingually to be able to have an obtuse exit angle coming inward. So I'm going to move the margin out a little bit farther and cut straight in.
Okay.
Adjust that angle until it's a little bit obtuse. There we go. And then, when you're happy with everything about the occlusal, then you can find the corners of the box and go gingerly. But don't waste your time if you don't have the facial angle walls just right before you go gingerly. All right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, coming along. Okay, you're working on 3MO?
Yeah.
Okay, so 14, well, you didn't change 15 yet.
I'm doing 3.
Well, but we talked about this strategy for when you're going to do the DO, right?
Yeah.
So can you do a DO on this one?
Okay. I'll change it.
I mean, we don't know. Clearly you have to change 15, but if you can't do the DO there, then you'd have to do it over here. And you have to change 2 in order to do that, right? Because that already has damage on it. So this is what I wanted you to work out ahead of time before you started the MO. Okay, so in any event, you got a funny looking banana shape here, right? And the central pit is actually still pretty much there. So the size of the isthmus is fine, but let's extend. Make sure you include the central pit and then come a little bit up into that facial groove. But you don't need to keep on going all the way up in here like this. So make it look more like a foot than a banana, okay? So make a little bit more of a heel shape, a little bit more of a defined corner there, and then things tend to fit together a little better. So the pulpophore level seems to be pretty good. Your facial clearance is good, but your exit angle here, how would you describe that exit angle?
90 degrees.
Right, and yet we're doing a composite prep, right? Yeah. Now over here...
I know.
Yeah, so your margin is going to be out here. Okay, so don't let it throw you. If you slip and the burr comes around and then you try to pull it back in the box and it makes a groove there, then you go back and that's your new margin. So go ahead and nip out lingually until you get
Okay.
until you get to this margin where you have it. Then cut straight in and make the obtuse exit angle and make sure you come in far enough. So yeah, we can't have that kind of problem with all kinds of undermined enamel and poorly defined margins and so forth, and leave it like that. The only way to fix it is to overextend lingually. So, you know, we can probably do a prep that passes now, but not if you tried to leave all that mess over there, right?
Right.
Okay, and then try to change this back to an obtuse angle. So that means move the margin out a little farther,
Okay.
then recut the angle inward, and then again over here, choose your angle, get the length, come in farther, then make the curve. Then you can find the corner of the box. Define the corners really well so you get the axial wall in the position that you want, and get just a little bit more clearance than that, and I'll show you how to make the gingival bevel.
Okay.
Okay, but off to a pretty good start on that one. Okay, so you got some gingival clearance. You got a little bit of a funny corner
Oh, actually, I was trying to make groove, and
right
that
in
just
here.
disturbed the mark.
Okay, and how are you trying to make grooves? Well, first of all, it's a composite prep, right?
Oh yeah.
So I don't need grooves, but how are you trying to make grooves?
With the fissure and
With the burr?
trying to, yeah.
Yeah, so the burr is way too big.
Oh.
Okay, so yeah, we have a burr that will work for making grooves, but we haven't talked about how to use it yet.
Yeah.
It's this one right here. See this?
Okay.
1/4 round burr. Look how much smaller it is than the
Yeah.
55 burr.
Right,
Okay.
right. So how are we supposed to make the groove if not the burr?
With the hand instruments, like the way I showed you with the hand instruments.
Oh, so you
That's
just-
how we're learning how to make the
okay.
grooves, is with the hand instruments. Okay. So anyway, so you've still got a little bit of an acute angle right here. 90 degrees would be about like this. So we're really looking for something that's definitely obtuse. So on this side, you ended up being a little bit acute also. And sometimes the burr wants to slide out this way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So we never cut this direction. We only cut from the outside in.
Okay.
We find the margin, then we cut from the margin inward. That's how we control the margin. Then we find the corner about right here. Of course, so the composite, it's going to be less deep axially, right?
Yeah.
So even amalgam would be about right here, but you're pretty deep in that area. So again, if you're looking in the right direction, then you'll be able to see exactly where you are at the margin and how deep you are axially and so forth. Now we can smooth the gingival floor a little bit. It's kind of rough, make sure there's no excess. And then we can go ahead and make the bevel. Okay, so I'm going to take this burr out. We're going to put in a ET3F burr. This really tall one with a little tiny point on it. So this burr works great for making gingival bevels. So I'm going to take the burr and I'm going to put it against your lingual wall and cut gingerly right at that wall into the gingival margin. And then away from the wall toward the middle. This way I get a smooth connection between the bevel and the lingual wall. I cut only as far as the middle, then I put it against the facial and I cut gingerly right here into the gingival margin, then away from that wall toward the middle. So now we have a bevel that goes all the way from the facial to the lingual. Smooth connection there, because I'm starting the burr at the margin. And I cut gingerly right there, and then away from the wall toward the middle. Don't start in the middle and cut toward the facial lingual walls, because you'll never get there.
Okay.
All right?
Yep.
All right, so practice that a little bit. You can play around with it a bit, and then in a minute we'll start the DO after I do the demonstration. Okay. Close. Okay, so not enough gingival clearance quite yet, and
It's like I want to spare the next tooth, but what do I do? Like every time I go down, like I will make it, I will make it.
Well, look this way so you know you're not hitting it.
Right.
So see the way I'm looking?
Yes.
Now, but you know, when you get your occlusal part and get a nice angle and get a nice length, then make the curve, then find the corner.
Right.
The better we define the corners, the easier it is to go gingerly safely. So you don't really have well-defined internal line angles. So you can always go back to the occlusal, find a new margin, cut straight in, get the angle you want, get the length that you want, join the isthmus, then find the corner, maybe about right here. So when we have well-defined corners, that helps us to get the shape of the axial wall. Then we can get rid of the excess along the facial lingual walls all the way to the margins, matching the gingival part of the wall to the occlusal part of the wall. Then when we want to go gingerly a little bit farther, we just use the corners. Drill a little hole, cut away from that side, drill a little hole over here, cut away from this side. But you've got to get the corners in the right place so you know where to drill the holes. Then you can get the shape of the axial wall. Then by the time you get rid of the excess, along the facial side and along the lingual side, and then in between, notice how I'm looking so I can see exactly how close I am to the adjacent tooth, right? So as long as you can see if you're hitting the adjacent tooth, guess what? You won't hit the adjacent tooth. If you can't see if you're hitting it or not, then guess what? You're hitting it. All right, so let's make that bevel. So I'm going to put the 55 burr away, take out this one, the ET3F. So as long as we have nice flat walls on the facial lingual, we can put the burr right against that wall and cut gingerly right there. Then into the gingival floor and then cut away from the wall toward the middle. So down the wall, into the gingival, and then away from the wall toward the middle. Then down the facial wall, cut into the gingival margin, then away from that wall toward the middle. And that's it. Have the burr leaning as much as you can toward the axis, and you get a bevel that's pretty easy to see, and it'll work just fine.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
All right, so a little more definition on the internal line angles. It's going to make things much easier. Okay. Somehow I like it when patients have heads.
Yeah.
Makes it a lot easier for them to pay their bill. Okay, so let's get this tightened up a little bit. All right. So beautiful 90-degree exit angle on the facial, beautiful obtuse exit angle on the lingual. So, and this is maybe a little bit more obtuse than you need. So this is 90, could be just a little bit obtuse, and that it'll make it a little bit easier to find the corners of the box if you're not quite as far from 90. You can make it just a little bit obtuse, then it's easier to find the corner of the box, maybe right here. So don't go quite as deep axially for the composite prep. Okay, so find the margin, find the angle, get the length, make the curve, find the corner, get rid of the excess along that wall. Okay, so now we can go ahead and make the gingival bevel. Microburr block. Okay, so the ET3F is right here. So again, as long as you have flat walls, you can put the margin or burr right against that wall and cut gingerly right there. And then away from the wall. Down the wall, away from the wall. Down the wall here, away from the wall here. Now, in reality, this wall should have been extended out a little bit farther to get an obtuse angle. But I like, for an amalgam, that's a beautiful wall, and it's nice and straight and flat all the way down to the gingival, so I like it. So I just didn't really want to change it, because it looks so good. But anyway, we can put a bevel that makes a smooth connection to that wall, as long as we have the burr parallel to the wall. And the same thing over here. Okay, so I'm going to do one over here on 3. There's a little bit of damage already on the adjacent tooth for whatever reason, but I think we can still make a pretty good prep where we need to. So I'm going to start by just drilling a hole right here, right at the marginal ridge, right and centered on the contact facial-lingually, and as close as I can get it to the adjacent tooth. And as I said, I thought I blew out all the oil from my handpiece earlier today, but apparently I didn't. Still a little bit left. At least it didn't get on the mirror. Okay, so that's the start. Now I'm going to find the facial margin. That looks pretty good. Now I'm going to find the lingual margin. Oh boy. A little farther. Now I'm going to go ahead and find my angles inward. And this will be an amalgam prep, since we just finished the composite prep. So I'm going to come straight in. So I know I'm straight, but I didn't know what the angle is until I look in the mirror. A little bit obtuse, so I'm going to change it. Again, I'm starting from the same margin and just changing the angle coming in, always starting at the margin and cutting inward. So that's pretty much a good clearance and a good angle and a good length. Same thing on the lingual side. Obviously it's obtuse, so we're going to change it. Keep modifying a little bit at a time until we get to the angle that we want. Okay, so again, find the margin, find the angle, get the length. Okay, still a little bit obtuse. I'm going to change it slightly more. Okay, just about there. So take your time. Okay, so now I'm going to start here, and I'm going to cut all the way along the oblique ridge. Now, this typodont is unusual compared to normal tooth anatomy because it has 2 distal pits. So we're going to have to include both of them just because that's the way the quote-unquote tooth is. But I'm going to bring this margin all the way along here. I'm just barely going to pick up that pit there and a little bit up the distal lingual groove. So I'm looking parallel to the oblique ridge. And I'm looking in the direction I want to cut, and I'm cutting toward my eye, so I can't be too far off. So I've just barely got that pit. I'm going to do a little bit more. But notice how straight it is, how parallel it is to the oblique ridge. This is what we're trying to get. Okay, now I'm going to just make a smooth connection over here. Try to preserve a little bit on the distal lingual triangular ridge. Flatten the floor a little bit. Okay, so now I'm ready to go gingivally. I've got my occlusal outline just the way I want it. So again, if you don't have the occlusal outline the way you want it, don't go gingerly. It's never going to work out for you. Okay, so let's see. So I'm going to look in this direction so I know where I am axially. Drill a hole at the facial wall. Cut away from the facial side, do the same thing on the lingual side. Down the wall, away from the wall, down the wall, away from the wall. So now we've got an axial wall. We've got corners. All I have to do is get rid of the excess along the facial side. Again, notice how I'm looking so I can see exactly how close I am to the adjacent tooth. Do the same thing on the lingual side. Notice I'm adjusting my viewing position so I can see the space between the margin and the adjacent tooth, and when the burr gets into that space, I can see exactly how close the burr is to the adjacent tooth. Now, it's tempting to break away the excess in the middle, isn't it? You could take your burr and just push it against there. Now, on a plastic tooth, that's not a good idea. On a patient, that would work out just fine because it won't break and cut across the end of the enamel rods at the gingival. But it can easily chip the gingival margin here, so we're going to try to just reduce the size a little bit so if it does flake off, it's not going to tend to chip the margin. Okay, so my axial wall is actually a little bit more curved than the outline of the tooth, so I can adjust that shape just a little bit here. So now let's go ahead and finish it with the hand instruments. And again, some of you haven't really been practicing your hand instruments as much as you should have. So on the upper right, the hoe is the one that fits against the facial lingual wall, so we use it to come down the facial margin. Again, using the mirror so you can see that you're cutting exactly 90 degrees all the way down that margin and then into the corner. A nice square corner internally. Flip the instrument, the other end does the lingual margin and then the lingual internal line angle. And then the enamel hatchet fits against the axial wall, and you can square up that corner internally a little bit, but you can also lean the instrument away from the wall and use the upper corner of the instrument to cut into the wall and make the retentive groove. Both the facial and the lingual. And again, if you wanted to use a burr to make the retentive groove, as somebody was talking about earlier, you better use a burr that's small enough so that it's not going to touch the DEJ. Again, you have to have enough dent on the facial lingual wall so you can make a retentive groove without undermining the enamel. I'm going to show you how to do that in a minute. Okay, so this is the DO, so I can use the distal GMT, and so I can bevel the axial pulpal line angle with this, just like I showed yesterday, or flip it over and do the other direction all the way to the wall there. But I can also angle the gingival floor, which is its main purpose, all the way to the facial wall and all the way to the lingual wall. So as far as an amalgam prep is concerned, we're finished. Okay, but if I wanted to make a more defined retentive groove, I start with the hand instrument the way I already did it, and then I can switch over and use a little tiny burr that's not here. Okay, so I need to borrow somebody's quarter round burr. I was showing you yours earlier. If I can grab that for you, I'll replace it along with your number 3 tooth. Thank you. Little tiny burr. So 1/4 round burr. So the grooves that we've already made with the hand instrument will guide the burr when I sort of come up that facial wall and then up the lingual side. So I'm just pushing it in directly into the lingual wall and into the facial wall at the axial wall, as long as your axial wall is in the right location. Now the other thing I want to show you is if you want to, I referred to this earlier, if you want to bevel the axial pulpal line angle with the burr, then use the end of the 55 burr. And you can do it like this. Lean the burr distally. That makes a nice bevel without any trouble at all. All right. And reshape that a little bit there, and that's pretty much what we're looking for. Okay, so we worked on the MO, so here's the DO. Okay, so you remember about the DO. Well, first of all, you remember about anything on the upper arch. It's tempting to look down the axis, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it still is tempting. Okay. So we'll see what the consequences are. So with the DO, you're more likely to hit the adjacent tooth. So there's the angle that we're always looking for, that damage on the adjacent tooth. And you can see the burr was leaning at exactly that angle when it was in the prep too. That's why you got overextended axially. So again, we're always making sure we look parallel to the contact, downward at a 45-degree angle like I'm looking right now. Don't try to look down the axis, or it forces you to hit the adjacent tooth and overextend axially. Okay, so you got clearances that are okay. Your exit angles are close to 90. The walls aren't particularly flat, but they're close. But then once you get these walls done from the facial and the lingual, you want to start from the facial and follow the oblique ridge, right? Like this. Now, how do we make sure we're following the oblique ridge? We look in the right direction. What is the right direction? The way I'm looking right now. So there's where the outline form should have been. So you crossed right over the top of the oblique ridge into the central fossa. Okay, so we're desperately trying to avoid doing that. So make sure you look in the right direction. And then the same thing when you're over here working in the box. Pretty dull burr now, huh? Make sure you're looking, boy, it smells like a barbecue, huh? Barbecued tofu. Anyway, so you see how we can control the axial wall position if we're looking in the right direction? That's what it's all about, right there. Making sure you...
I was trying to make the internal angle sharp. That's when I pushed the axial wall that way, and then I tried to smooth it.
Whatever you're doing in the box, whether it's sharpening internal line angles or anything, whatever you're doing in the box, look this way.
Okay.
Don't ever try to look this way.
From the lingual.
Yeah, from the buccal or the lingual, but parallel to the contact, downward at a 45-degree angle, so you can see the position and see how close you are to the adjacent tooth. Okay? All right, and then your 13 MO was over here. It's kind of wet, huh? So what were your observations on 13?
The wall angle of the isthmus is not right.
Okay, so you're saying there's something wrong with your vertical angle of the isthmus?
It was for amalgam, so I think I should have converted.
It could be a little more convergent on the lingual side, but it's pretty close.
The facial proximal clearance is overextended.
Yeah,
So
instead of being
lingual.
0.5, it's about 0.9. It's probably closer to a millimeter over here on the lingual. Okay.
Yeah. Then the axiopulpal bevel, that I don't think it's really come out. I tried, but it wasn't.
Okay, I see where you tried a little bit right here.
Yeah, but it,
Okay, not a critical thing, but you know, we'll work on that.
I think the gingival angle is not correct.
But what do you mean gingival angle? You mean the slope of the gingival floor?
Yes.
So you didn't use the GMT? Did you use the GMT, the
Yes,
gingival margin
I
trimmer?
did use the GMT.
Okay.
I tried to make those grooves which nick the wall with
Okay.
the wrong burr.
Hold on a second. I'm still considering your gingival angulation. I don't think you're too far off as far as the gingival angulation is concerned. So you're talking about some sort of a groove somewhere?
Yeah, on the lingual. I
Right
was
here?
trying to make the groove with the wrong burr, and then
Oh,
I think
okay.
again.
Yeah, you undermined all the enamel out here on that facial, so that would have been a good thing to change.
Yeah.
Now, if your outline form had come in a little farther first, and then made the curve, and then found the corner about right here, then you would have had more dent to put a groove in, but not with that burr nonetheless. But then always make sure you get rid of the excess along that wall.
Okay.
If you leave that excess, that's a problem. If you create the excess when you're trying to make a groove, you still got to get rid of the excess because it's all undermined. Okay, you got a little chewing on the adjacent tooth.
Yeah.
It's getting a little bit better, but again, if you lean distally here, which you tend to do, it's not going to damage the adjacent tooth as much as it does when you're doing a DO, so we still have to avoid looking down the axis. Okay? All right. Okay, so we did the MO, and now we're talking about the DO. Oh, poor number 15.
Yeah, I scoped it.
Somebody doesn't like number 15. So, how'd that happen?
When I was doing the proximal, I probably did not notice, but my burr was like running along the surface, the mesial surface of 15.
Yeah, so if you're looking this way, of course, you'll see it.
Yes. Like I tried to like do it a lot, and I saved it for a long time, and then
So,
I did not even realize.
can you see the difference between this and this?
Yes.
Okay, well, at some point, you didn't see that difference.
Yes.
Okay, so look the way I am, and you'll always see that difference. Now, you made it more challenging because you didn't get the clearances you need facially and lingually. I would have extended more lingually and gotten more clearance. If you get a little more clearance, then you'll be working farther from the adjacent tooth, and that's always helpful. So go back to the occlusal level at the pulpal floor level and get some clearance. Then when you cut inward, everything looks a lot easier to do when it comes to making the box. So you see it's more obvious where the corners of the box should be. Now, even though I have obtuse angles,
Like I tried. I don't know why. Like I tried to keep it like as conservative until the contact as possible. I don't extend it.
well, you know, if you want to keep it as conservative as possible, you don't do the prep.
Yeah.
All right?
That's
That's
why
very
it's like-
conservative.
I
Oh, you
tried
actually want to remove the decay and be conservative.
It's like I try to restrict myself to just the contact area and like I stick it there. That's why
Yeah, but you're not removing the decay. There's still decay in your facial lingual margins
the
because
contacts are giving
you
me a
haven't
hard
extended
time.
far enough. Well, now you know how to move the margin out farther.
Yes.
Okay, so again, you can move the margin. You can put the margin wherever you want it and do it safely, and then cut straight in and do it by trial and error the way we always do and adjust your angles the way you want. Then you can find the corner of the box. And down the wall and away from that wall, down this wall and away from this wall. Now it looks a lot different. Now just getting rid of that excess is pretty easy to do. And when you want to go gingerly farther and get rid of the excess and the gingival margin, look this way and then you're safe.
Okay.
But if you ever look down this way, then you're in big risk.
Yes.
Now, if I found my margin here and my angle 90 degrees over here and I got the length far enough inward for amalgam, then I'm ready to do the outline form following the oblique ridge. But I'm going to do it different from what you did because I'm looking along the oblique ridge, right? So see the way you extended into the oblique ridge? Should have been like this, but you extended up into there. And that's because you're looking the wrong way. So you got to look along the oblique ridge, as we discussed in the lecture.
Okay.
You've got to be looking along the oblique ridge. And if you don't, now you know the consequences. Okay, so go ahead and get rid of the excess. You might go gingerly one more time to get some clearance. And then start in on your 19 MO within the next 5 minutes or so. Okay, oh yeah, and I'll check the 13. So tell me about 13. What am I looking at right now? So I turn my head a little bit. I'm going to turn the manikin a little bit more. So now I'm looking down the axis, and so what's catching my attention right now?
The
Hmm?
like the proximal clearance.
No.
Axiom.
Yeah, that catches my attention, but what's the most interesting thing? Did you comment about it on your grading sheet?
I have.
So see the facial wall? See the facial wall over here? See the lingual wall over here?
Yes.
I didn't have to move the mirror in order to see both of them, right? So I'm seeing both at the same time, right? So what does that mean if you see both walls at the same time? Yes, it's divergent occlusally. Now this is a composite prep, so that's not a horrible thing, but you really have to get that under control. And in reality, even with composite, this is probably too much divergence. Okay, you're asking for some serious problems there. So again, make sure you keep the burr vertical all the time. Look in this direction, do the whole box looking in this direction the way we always do. But don't look from the facial and do one wall and look from the lingual to the other wall. You'll always end up with a divergent prep because you're always leaning the burr away from your eye.
Right.
Okay? Everybody tends to lean the burr away from their eye, so make sure you're not doing that and then do the prep. Okay? So check from the other direction. Okay, what else did you notice on your grade sheet?
Like my gingival seat is too wide. Like had it been a wider tooth, I would have exposed the pulp.
Yes. So yeah, very much too wide. For composite prep, the axial wall should have been about right here. Now, how did it get so wide? If you're looking this way, you'll never get that wide. You can see the difference between this and this, right?
Yeah.
It's easy to see that difference. Even though you can't see the whole burr, you can see the difference between this and this. So if you're looking that way, you can control the axial wall position. But that's a pretty big problem right there. That is, in the middle of the pulp chamber, literally. Okay. What else did you notice?
Like my grooves, the
What?
retentive grooves that have.
Wait a minute. Isn't this a composite prep?
Yes, it should.
So no retentive grooves. No retentive grooves for composite. Don't need them. Is that what these are here?
Yeah, I think.
Okay, so you went too deep axially and you put the grooves at the axial wall. So that's guaranteed to hit the pulp horn, like that bloody picture that I showed on yesterday. Okay, so we don't need retentive grooves, but if we did, we'd put them here. I don't care where your axial wall is, put the grooves closer to the DEJ. That's the only way you're going to be safe.
Okay.
But not for composite. Okay, what else did you notice? Did you measure the height of this wall right here?
It's shallow.
Yeah, it's a little bit short. So yeah, it just felt like your pulpal floor was underextended, and this wall over here is even shorter. Now, that's because you're leaning your burr distally, and the pulpal floor is not horizontal, it's rising toward the box. So that makes a short wall over here. So again, keep the burr vertical when you're in the isthmus, so the pulpal floor is horizontal.
Okay.
And then when you measure the height of the wall here, get a little bit deeper, and then your pulpal floor will be in a better position overall. Now your gingival bevel is, you got a little bit over here, but again, we start the bevel at the walls and cut toward the middle, right? And don't have the burr too vertical. Lean it axially as much as you can in order to try to get a bevel that's easier to see. Okay, but the most striking thing is the divergence. Now, of course, what that does is it makes you way overextended lingually at the top of the wall, and you're extended okay at the bottom of the wall. You have a reasonable clearance at the bottom of the lingual wall, but you have way too much clearance toward the top. Okay, so that's
I'm struggling with the contacts. I'm struggling with the contact areas. Like it takes too long for me to like break the contact, and I either end up like nicking the adjacent tooth.
Oh, now you know the
the
strategy over here. So we did step by step over here, found the margin, found the new angle coming in, got the length, found the corner, and then going gingivally. The 7 steps just takes 20 seconds each time you go gingivally. But if you're not checking to make sure the burr is vertical and you're not looking parallel to the contact, then of course it can't be done. All right, so we'll keep working on that. Okay, so spend no more than 5 more minutes on anything and then start on 19 MO.
Okay.
19. Okay. Okay, so we worked on the MO, the DO. Okay, so what do you think of this so far?
It's wide.
And when you say wide, what do you mean? You have to be very specific with me.
Wide buckling.
In the box or the isthmus, occlusal part? Okay, so it's some things overextended, some direction?
Yeah, I inverted into oblique ridge.
Yes, okay, so you overextended into the oblique ridge. Now, your facial margin has reasonable clearance, except for the fact that most of the reason it has clearance is because there's damage on the adjacent tooth. So I don't know how you got damage out beyond your prep unless this was prior damage. So
yeah,
we have to be careful. That's why we make sure there's no damage on either tooth. So the facial margin probably should have been out a little bit farther to get clearance with an intact number of 15. But again, at the pulpal level, just make sure you have the margin and the angle you want and get the length that you want. And then once you get to here, then you start cutting along the oblique ridge. What direction are you looking? The way I am right now. I'm looking along the oblique ridge, right? I'm looking toward the distal lingual groove. I'm running the burr back and forth toward my eye and away from my eye. Then I can't miss. I'll always have the wall there exactly where it should be. Okay? So again, as we discussed in the lecture, it's finding the viewing direction that makes all the difference. Now lingually, you got a big hook there, right? But the good news is you don't have enough clearance anyway. So we're going to move the margin out lingually. Even a little bit more. Make sure you're happy with where the margin is before you do the next step. So, you know, make sure that you know you're going to get clearance where the margin is right now. Okay, there we go. There's some clearance. So look how much farther I went, almost another millimeter. Then we're going to cut straight in at whatever angle you want, depending upon what the restoration material is. Okay, and then we can just smooth this area right over here. Then we can find the corner of the box right here. And then cut away from the wall this way. Find the corner of the box over here. Away from the wall this way. So again, I'm looking parallel to the contact downward at a 45-degree angle so I can see what I'm doing. I can see where I am axially. I can see how close I am to the adjacent tooth. What more do you need to see, right? Then get rid of the excess along here, and then you'll end up with the box being exactly the size that it should be facial lingually. You got clearances facial lingually, you get rid of the excess gingivially, and you may have some clearance gingivally. The trick is you've still got damage on the adjacent tooth below your gingival margin, so it makes it all the harder to tell if you have gingival clearance if some of it's because of damage on the adjacent tooth. So make sure you always change the adjacent teeth as you need to. Okay? All right, so what do you think about 13?
So first, marginal ridge.
Okay, are you looking at your book?
Yeah.
Okay, so the marginal ridge, that's interesting. So what have you done there?
My burr slip off.
Oh, okay. It looks like you were following the discussion we had yesterday about cutting through the marginal ridge, following the mesial marginal ridge developmental groove on a mesial side of a upper first premolar. There's nothing like that over here. So, and besides that, if you cut into the contact, you'd have to make a box to get clearance everywhere. So yeah, if you have the burr here and then you keep it going fast and then take it out,
yeah.
Okay, make it stop before you take it out. I do the same thing. I take the burr out when it's still running, and that's
Right.
pretty dangerous. Okay, so is this amalgam or composite?
Amalgam.
Amalgam, okay. And so the width is a little bit narrow for amalgam. It's okay for composite. We want to get a definite millimeter for amalgam. And it doesn't look like you're leaning your burr toward the marginal ridge enough. Make sure it's really obvious that you're leaning the burr toward the marginal ridge when you do that area, that dovetail area. Okay, You got a good clearance and a reasonable exit angle for this particular tooth. It's always hardest to see the exit angle when you're at the corner of the tooth, but you know that's probably pretty reasonable. On the lingual, good clearance and a good exit angle. But what happened to the axial wall? What happened to putting the corners in the right place and cutting away from those walls? Okay, that's all you had to do. But don't go back and forth. If you make corners, don't go back and forth from facial to lingual, because then the axial always starts to curve the wrong way. Come down this wall, cut away from that wall, and then come down this wall, cut away from that wall. And again, this is all you need to see. I can see exactly what's going on there. Then just get rid of the excess, and you'll be fine. Now you got a little bit of gingival clearance, not quite enough for amalgam. So get rid of that excess, angle the gingival floor with the hand instrument, and then you'll probably be okay for an amalgam prep. But of course, practice putting retentive grooves in too. All right, did you do that? Did you get way over here? Again, looking along the arch is the only way to do it. There's no other choice. That's why I showed you how to do it. Okay, so we're looking this way. So then we can see if we're leaning the burr lingually. Notice that you're leaning your burr facially, right? That's a big difference. And notice you cut way too much tooth structure around in here, huh? But again,
to cover it up.
well, if you're looking the wrong way, then you can expect all kinds of problems. So look this way. So you know you're leaning the burr lingually. Just keep it not much bigger than the burr and go into the distal groove, then come back again. Distal buffalo groove is right here, right? Buffalo groove, lingual groove. Then we're trying desperately to preserve the triangular ridges between these grooves with the burr leaning lingually all the time. So as long as you're looking this way, you've got it under control. But if you're not looking that way, then you have nothing under control. And when we get close to the adjacent tooth, we look this way, right? Then I can see exactly how close I am to the adjacent tooth. Okay, so you got a little bit of damage on the adjacent tooth.
The things that she was saying, I felt the same thing, that when I was removing the wall and facially I couldn't adjust it, that's when I nicked the tooth.
Okay, well your clearance on the facial's okay, and you got a little bit of damage on the adjacent tooth, not too much. But are we doing amalgam or composite here?
Amalgam.
Okay, so let's get closer to 90 degrees. And see the way you're leaning your burr facially?
Yeah.
You want to keep the burr vertical. So check it first to make sure it's vertical, and then look this way. And once you've found your margin, just cut straight in, or away from the margin. Now I don't know, I have no idea what the angle is now. So I look, I see. That's closer to 90 degrees. Now let's change it again, but again, make sure the burr is vertical. Put the burr at the margin.
So when you're using the burr, you see occlusally, but to check, we have to...
I'm not looking occlusally at all. I'm looking parallel to the contact, downward at a 45-degree angle.
Yes, okay.
And then I look occlusally to evaluate it, but I have to use a mirror to do that. Now I have my 90-degree angle.
Yeah.
Okay? And I've got a little bit of length. And I can sort of see right now where the corner of the box should be, about right here. Not over there, but right here.
Okay.
And now I'm going to, now that I got the margin and the angle and the length, then I make a smooth curve here. Now over on the lingual side, you've got too much clearance, obviously, but the wall's not real flat. It's sort of close to 90. Now, if you have that much clearance, the burr wants to slip out this way. So what I do is I put an extra finger behind it and give it a little bit more protection, so it doesn't tend to slip as readily. Then find the corner and then get rid of the excess to match the gingival part to the occlusal part. But again, as long as I have my finger behind there, it's a little bit safer. But that's a pretty good place for the corner, right there.
Yeah.
So I like that part pretty well, but you just need to make that wall a little bit flatter. But now the corner on the facial side should be about right here. Now all I can see is where I am axially. Okay? I can't see the wall, but I don't need to. I need to see how close I am to the adjacent tooth and how deep I am axially.
Okay.
So that allowed me to put the corner right where I wanted it.
Oh, okay. I was trying to see the facial wall.
You can't.
Yeah.
There's always one
That
wall
was-
you can't see. And so, you know, now people that try to see it look from two different directions and then they get divergent preps every time. Okay. So you see, I can't see the facial wall, but what do I need to see? I don't need to see the facial wall. I need to see how close I am to the adjacent tooth and how deep I am axially. And now I can see that. And then as long as the occlusal part's done nicely, then I use that to guide me when I go gingival and match the gingival part to the occlusal part, and there we go. Okay, so your gingival clearance is reasonable. The actual on the lingual side was pretty good. On the facial side, now you know how to correct that by getting closer to 90 degrees to start with. And you got to look in the right direction when you're making the occlusal part, right? All right, you're coming along. So you can finish that up with the hand instruments and start on the premolar. Okay. So I'm going to come all the way over here. Yep, so I can see what I'm doing. So it looks like you're leaning your burr facially instead of lingually. So this would be leaning lingually, but see, you're leaning facially, even over here. So if you're trying to like look down the axis or something like that, look sort of some weird direction, then all bets are off as far as the angle. If you look this way, you can see exactly what you're doing. You see the angle. You can see the wall heights. Now, preserve the triangular ridges better. We're trying not to cut through the triangular ridges. We're trying to cut into each of the grooves, but preserve the triangular ridges in between. Then it'll work a lot better on the occlusal. And miss this groove a little bit right there. That's probably a little bit better position for that groove. Okay. And the distal groove would have been right here, not extending into that area there. And then of course preserve the triangular ridges in between. That would make it easy. Okay, so I like your lingual clearance. I like your lingual exit angle. Fairly straight wall, and you have a good place to put the corner of the box right here. And then on the facial side, you're pretty obtuse, especially in the gingival part. So when we work in the box, we look this direction. So I can see exactly how close I am to the adjacent tooth. So you were worried about that, but you know, looking this way, I can see exactly where I am. So I find my margin first, and I cut straight in.
I do this the opposite. I take it from the gingival seat, like towards the axial-parietal angle, to the facial margin.
Well, that's not going to work.
Yeah, I tried to.
So the way we've been doing this, at the pulpal floor level, find the margin, then from the margin cut inward, from the margin inward, and adjust the angle until it's 90 degrees.
Okay.
But all the time, I know how close I am to the adjacent tooth. I know I'm not hitting it, so it's perfectly safe. Again, do the occlusal part first. Okay. Then we can match the gingival part to the occlusal part. Okay. Find the margin, the angle, the length, then make the curve. Then find the corner of the box, maybe about right here. Okay. So yeah, about right there. We got to get a nice corner. So we put the burr about where we want axially and put it against the wall that we just made and match the gingival part to the occlusal part. Drill a hole right down that wall. Then all I have to do is get rid of that excess right there. And then I've got the facial wall exactly where I want it. Match the gingival part to the occlusal part. Okay, there's still a little hook there which I can remove with a hand instrument. Okay. Or if I have enough clearance, I can do it with the burr a little bit. And reduce a little bit of it. See how close I am to the adjacent tooth? Yes. Notice that you can see how close you are to the adjacent tooth, right? Because you and I are looking in the same direction. So you're seeing exactly what I see. So if you can see how close the burr is to the adjacent tooth, that means I do. And you could. All right.
Like I could see it, but like I was trying to make it like 90 degrees, but I think I was taking it like vice versa from the axial-parietal angle to the corner. And like I was trying to prevent nicking the adjacent tooth.
Well, just look this way and do the same strategy, the same steps in the same order as what we've been working on, and it gets pretty easy. Over here, margin, angle, length. I mean, you might put an extra finger behind here if you're worried about the burr slipping out.
Okay.
So margin, angle, length, curve, corner, and then get rid of the excess to the margin, match the gingival part to the occlusal part. And now we're looking pretty good. But see, the actual should have been here going this way and here going that way. So getting those corners is the key. Now your gingival clearance is just great. So now you can finish it up with the hand instruments and move on to the premolar.
Okay. For the upper teeth also, like, it's the same way that I should go for the facial clearance. Like, I always have trouble working with the facial side.
Well, probably you do on one side of the arch.
Yes.
Okay. On the other side of the arch, it might be a little bit easier, but the other issue is that on these teeth, the anatomy, the corners are a lot sharper on the facial side. So it seems to suggest that you have to work closer to the adjacent tooth, and that's probably true. But again, remember what I showed you over here. If we want to look on the monitor so you can see what I'm showing you, this is what you should see, is what's on the monitor.
Okay.
So look this way so you can see how close you are to the adjacent tooth and find the margin at the level of the pulpal floor, then cut straight in and keep adjusting it by trial and error until you get the margin and the angle, the clearance and the angle and the length, then the curve, then the corner, then get rid of the excess along the wall. We do it the same way every time. And that technique, that approach is identical for any tooth in any quadrant.
I think I always try to, like, I try to make visibility for that part, like on the entire wall. I'm trying to look through it. That's the reason, like,
Yeah.
it's like my hand, like my mirror is shifting constantly, and I'm worried that I'll nick it.
Well, there's only one direction you have to look, but again, you have to remember that you can't see this wall.
Right.
So we do the occlusal part of it by trial and error at the level of the pulpal floor, and then we don't have to see it when we go gingially. We have to see where we are axially and how close we are to the adjacent tooth, and we know we're putting the burr against the wall, so we're just continuing what we've already started down to the gingival floor.
Yes.
So we're just doing the gingival part of the box. We've already done the occlusal part of the box at the level of the pulpal floor. And again, looking the right direction, you can see exactly what you need to. You know, I have no question at all about whether I'm hitting the adjacent tooth. I have also no question about where I am axially.
Yes.
Those are the things that we need to get totally under control.
Yes.
Now, if you wanted to go deeper gingially, you just drill the holes in the corners and then get rid of the excess. Now we're deeper gingially. So how long does that take, right?
Right.
Perfectly safe, as long as we're looking in the right direction. Okay? All right. Sure. Okay. So again, looking along the arch is the key to the whole lower preps. And so that means that we're going to position ourselves in a very different position. We'll be way over here like this. So now I can see what I need to. Okay? So you didn't see where the distal groove was here. You didn't see where the distal pit was. You didn't see that you were leaning the burr lingually and you're cutting through triangular ridges that you want to preserve. Okay? So the first thing we do is make sure you're looking in the right direction. Make sure we're leaning the burr lingually. And just follow this central groove right into the distal groove right here and get the distal pit. So there's the original cut right through there. Then we're going to cut up the distal buccal groove. We're going to keep the burr leading lingually all the way around here. And then with the 330 burr, we make sure the walls are all the same height as the burr, right? And we preserve the triangular ridges between each of the grooves. Okay, so when you're leaning the burr facially, so you might have been trying to look down this way or some other weird direction. You might have even been trying to look from the lingual, thinking that you could do it, and you can't. Nobody can. All right? So it's so easy to look along the arch this way, but you have to do it that way. Okay, now we're into the groove here. But look at all that triangular ridge here you cut away that you didn't need to. And you're cutting in here that you didn't need to. So we're trying to preserve the tooth, the triangular ridges especially, while we're just getting rid of the central groove. But we've got to see exactly where we are. Now in the box, of course, we look the same way as always, parallel to the contact, downward at a 45-degree angle. Now you're trying to go gingerly, right? But at this point, you have no facial clearance. Right? You got no facial clearance, so we got to get facial clearance. Don't even think about going gingerly until you have the occlusal outline done. That means you have the margins, you have the angles, you have the lengths, you have the curves. So I need to move out facially, right? So how can I do that without being afraid? What are you afraid of?
Hitting adjacent.
Yeah, so do you think I'm afraid of hitting the adjacent tooth?
No.
Yeah, why aren't I afraid of hitting the adjacent tooth?
Because you can see.
I can see what I'm doing. I can see how close I am to the adjacent tooth. Now, we've done that before on the upper arch, but it's no different on the lower arch. It's just we have to position ourselves a little differently in order to see what we need to. But again, it's trial and error. So I cut a little bit, then I check, and I cut a little bit and check. If I want to then come in a 90-degree angle, I cut straight in. I don't know I've cut a 90-degree angle. I have no idea if it's 90 degrees or not. So I look this way to see if it is. Okay, I actually got pretty close to 90. Oops, I also cut my pants a little bit. Little black threads there. So find the margin, find the angle, get the length, make the curve, then you can find the corner of the box, maybe about right there. And then I get rid of the excess at the bottom of that wall, and I got a nice looking wall, and I can go gingerly as far as I need to. Okay, now you don't really need to go any farther gingerly. You got a fair amount of clearance. We ended up with a pulpal floor that was a little bit deeper than it should have been, so otherwise we would have had an axial wall. And on the lingual, you might put an extra finger behind the handpiece so that you can get your margin and then get the angle without worrying about the burr slipping out. But anyway, now we're getting pretty close to 90. But take your time. Take your time finding the margin. Take your time getting the perfect angle. Take your time getting a nice long straight wall coming in from that margin. The more time you take to make sure that you have it right, the more time you save when you do the next step. Okay? And by the way, there's one thing that's written on the website that you guys should know. It seems like it's pretty stupid, but it's actually real. If you want to work faster, slow down. Okay? It almost sounds kind of metaphysical, doesn't it? Okay. But yeah, if you do the first part of the prep, take your time, then the last part of the prep gets much faster because the first part guides you. Okay? So now you can flatten that gingival floor and finish it off, and then you can start on the premolar. Okay, so you looked at the molar already. So notice that on the lingual side, there's still a little bit of an acute angle there. That's the kind of thing we have to be watching out for. Okay, so your isthmus is a little bit wide. You don't quite have the typical dovetail shape going facially.
Yeah.
You're leaning it lingually some of the time, but then also you leaned it facially at one point on the isthmus. We'll tend to make a dovetail over here near the marginal ridge, coming out facially, and then a separate groove extending into the lingual groove there, and that's pretty typical. A little bit of a separate area there. But again, keep the burr leaning about like this, not this much, and not this little. Just like this all the time when you're doing the occlusal. Just keep the burr perpendicular to the line between the cusps. That's a pretty good idea about what the angle should be. Okay, so, okay, composite prep.
This is amalgam, not a composite.
Excellent. So that's good because you have nice flared exit angles. You have nice obtuse exit angles.
I did that obtuse on purpose.
Yeah, and it's very good for composite. Now just make sure you get the gingival bevel. So yeah, if you bevel the gingival floor, you still got a little bit of a step over
I
here.
tried to do it with a GMT, but
Now, as I
with
discussed,
a bird, right?
well, remember, hand instruments do two things. Remove undermined enamel, okay? And they also sharpen internal line angles in dentin. They can't cut across the end of enamel rods. The point of the gingival bevel is to cut across the end of the enamel rods. So it cannot be done with any kind of a hand instrument in the patient. On a typodont, there are no enamel rods, so you know there's different ways of making a bevel, but still a GMT, even on a typodont, is not going to give you a good bevel. The burr, on the other hand, is really easy to use. All right, really makes the bevel easily. Okay, but anyway, that is definitely an improvement, and I think you're coming along on that.
And the groove, I should have made it thinner, right?
Yeah, a little thinner, and just hit it exactly on top of the groove itself. But anyway,
on number 19, I started an MO by mistake. Like then I read it's 20 DO. So should I change?
yeah,
this
change
one
19
or-
and 20 so you can do the DO. All right. Okay, there we go. Okay, so yeah, your isthmus is a little bit wide. The wall height at the marginal ridge is kind of short. It's definitely less than 1 millimeter. So that means you probably got a little bit overextended toward the marginal ridge. So if you overextend toward the marginal ridge, the wall should get taller, right?
Yes.
But it's shorter. So that means your pulpal floor is definitely underextended. Your walls are taller on the lingual because you got a little bit overextended in the isthmus. But the axial wall is the biggest issue, isn't it? So you had more success on the upper arch as far as the axial wall position. But on the lower arch, again, we're always looking parallel to the contact, downward at a 45-degree angle. So this is how you see where you are axially. Okay? You're way over here, but I'm here. And it's easy to see the difference between them, isn't it? So we do the same thing as usual, but this is the direction we look, so we can precisely control where the axial wall is and where these internal line angles are. So that's all we have to do is look that direction, and then we can get the axial wall in a very different position. Try to look any other direction, and it's going to be a problem. Okay? So again, try to figure out what it is you need to see, and then make sure you're looking in the right direction so you can see it. Okay? You spend all day here and not go too deep axially and not hit the adjacent tooth. All right? All right. So, yeah, for this as a composite prep, you're a little too close to 90 degrees on the lingual. The lingual exit angle is pretty much exactly 90 degrees, so it should have been a little obtuse. Facial side's fine for composite, but the axial wall is the big problem. Okay, and again, measure wall heights on the occlusal. All right? Okay. So everybody should be changing 19 and starting 20 DO right now. Okay, facial side you had a big problem on, huh? So how did it get away from you so much? Now, sometimes we try to use a new burr for every prep.
That's what I've been doing, and that's why I'm all done with 330.
Excellent. Okay. Same thing with the 55s, but obviously your burr decided it wanted to be out here, right?
Yeah, that's like I was.
So you might want to support the handpiece a little bit with another hand.
Can we do that in the bench press?
Why not?
Okay.
You can do it in a patient. Okay, you just have to stretch their cheek out a little bit and get an extra finger in there and try to stabilize it a little bit. So you get a good finger rest on the teeth over here. You can even try to put your thumb over here to stabilize it, and make sure you're always cutting from the outside in. If you ever cut from the inside out, it's gonna keep on going.
Outside in. Okay.
Always from the outside in. Now you got a really short wall over here, huh?
Yeah.
So again, when you do the occlusal, make sure you finish it. you don't have an occlusal prep here. Now you're leaning a little bit too much lingually. But at this pulpal level, you're going to have a real problem. So get some depth as you go through that central groove. Then when you get close to the marginal ridge, look this way, so you know where you are. And you're making a dovetail coming out facially, and then you're extending the lingual groove about right here. So that's kind of what we're expecting to see. Something more like that. Okay, but, you know, find your margin. You don't have a very long straight wall here. Get a long straight wall. Cut in farther. Make sure you go beyond where you want the axial before you start making the curve to join the isthmus. So now the lingual side is much easier to deal with, but the facial side, yeah, if you wanted to recut that facial margin, you'd have to really work hard. But always cut from the outside in and use a sharp burr and stabilize the handpiece. I think I showed everybody, maybe not everybody, but on the lower left, on the lingual, you can put your extra finger in here like this and stabilize the handpiece that way. Otherwise the burr wants to slip out, and it might very well do that. Okay?